Before I get into it, I'll just mention I still get people sending me messages on Facebook, trying to become my friends on Facebook, and 9 times out of 10, I got to write back to them and say, look, if you want to get to know me, you have to pay $1 to join Patreon. I do read every single message posted within Patreon. I do reply to those messages. I do meet those people, and some of those people have appeared on my channel. So 2 examples. Stephen Fate, I did a 1-hour podcast with him. Stephen Fate is a lawyer in Washington, D.C., so we had a very political podcast trying to talk about how to organize real vegan activism out of this mess of eccentrics we've got going on YouTube. But he's living in Washington, D.C., and obviously involved in law, politics, ecology, and he happens to be vegan, in case you hadn't guessed. And I just had Maud Vegan on the channel. Maud also, sorry, I'm using Maud as her first name. You know, it's not her real name. But anyway, Maud Vegan, I just did a 2-hour podcast with her that you can hear now if you pay the $1 and join Patreon. But all these people I basically met, and they communicated with me through Patreon. And then I set up a Skype conversation with them, or I replied to their questions in this format here in video. And I'm really happy to do that. I get intelligent comments and questions through Patreon, and I love making videos that respond to that. So from my perspective, for $1, you get a lot of entertainment value out of joining my my Patreon, and hopefully, you know, you can make connections with like-minded vegans that could lead to real activism in the real world. It might be me. It might be that you make a connection with me, and you and I together manage to organize something positive in the future. But it could be one of the other members, like Steven or like Maud Vegan or what have you. We've got a limited talent pool here, but we've got a lot of ambition. And I like to see people coming together at my Patreon page as a crossroads. But yes, currently, Patreon is my only income on planet Earth. It's the only money I've got coming in. I'm going to do a job interview in the next few days. And if I get that job, then my situation will change. And you guys will probably get more YouTube videos complaining about how busy I am or my life on the job. And fewer videos will start with me saying, I just got back from the gym. I don't know if that job would give me great access to a gym or not. We'll find out the hard way. All right. So I just got another message from Stephen Fate, as I mentioned. I've had appear on the channel before, and Stephen says we'd like to think of vegans on YouTube as being activists in quotation marks. I have to ask the question: is there another community of self-identified activists promoting a movement on YouTube that is able to do so effectively? So he's asking, are there positive examples for us to learn from on YouTube? He goes on to say, I'm skipping some of his message here, I think it's clear that personality and behavior-based content is what drives views, and views equal money. Is it reasonable to demand content from YouTube personalities that is substantive and pushes our social movement forward? Or do we have to come to terms with the fact that YouTube has an incentive structure that is fundamentally misaligned with the interests of veganism as a political movement? All right. This may be a shocking and unexpected reply unless you've read the title of this video. You want to learn from the best. You want to learn from positive examples. Don't look at the political channels on YouTube. I think you've got to look at things like comic books and video games. If you want to learn from which community, digital community, none of these are real communities. I hate this use of the word community. But if you want to learn from a community on YouTube that's using this medium to its utmost, that's really getting a lot of action, that's really getting positive outcomes, that's really making meetings and conventions and things happen in real life, that maybe in some cases raising tens of thousands of dollars through Kickstarter or raising millions of dollars to start a new film project or what have you, I think you got to look at comic books and video games. If you compare the way comic book groups and video game groups make use of YouTube, I think it's really easy to say that they're beating the hell out of vegans. And most people don't even think of making that comparison. In the past, I've made the comparison to some of the kind of soft political groups like TYT. TYT is also known as the Young Turks, and their political arm is called Wolfpack. That's a political movement against corruption and graft in American politics, against donation-driven political campaigns in the United States, trying to get new laws passed for that reason. Okay, we can learn some things from TYT, from the Young Turks. I think we can learn a lot more by looking at the success of, let's just talk about comic books for a minute as an example. You can find websites very easily by Googling right now that give you the total number of sales figures for every comic book in the last month. I think they're about 2 months behind, but month by month they upload those economic statistics. Those are real statistics. I think if you look through those lists, you will be shocked. Look at a few different months from the last couple of years. You might by accident get one month that had really high sales figures. Many of the mainstream big name comic books like Wonder Woman, comic books that are not trying to be edgy, artistic, subculture comic books, mainstream comic books, are selling only 20,000 copies or are struggling to sell 40,000 copies. Okay, those are small numbers. You may think that the number of vegans in the world is small. It is. The number of people interested in veganism, though, compared to the number of people interested in a comic book that's based on a major movie franchise or, a big name like this, you may be shocked to say, hey, you know what? We're in the same ballpark. You know something else? You look at the number of viewers on a video discussing these comic books, and it's very easy to find examples of a conversation between two comic book experts that's here on YouTube, and it has more views than the actual comic book being discussed, right? Or if you look at the sales figures for that comic book over the last several months, maybe the comic book has only 40,000 copies sold or 20,000, depending on the case. And this YouTube video has had 80,000 viewers. Okay, so they have reach, they have impact that's greater than what they're commenting on. And actually, like the English language, basically American-centered comic book scene. I mean, obviously there's a separate scene for France and Germany, but we're basically talking about English language mainstream comic books. It's not infinite. You may think, oh, those are massive cultural entities. Those are properties that have millions of dollars and millions of viewers and millions of copies sold. But when you look at the real numbers in every given month, there are just a couple of comic books that are selling 100,000 copies. And then below that, there's this struggle to survive between all the comic books selling 20,000 and 40,000. And, the fear of cancellation comes in, I think, when they get down to about 20,000 copies. Can that comic book be sustainable? Okay, so actually comic books are a subculture. And there's not a lot of money in the game. I can provide a link. I read a really kind of scary article, and I shared it with my professor at the time. I had a professor who was really interested in this stuff. The professor was interested in the topic of how do you earn a living as a creative writer. But I found an article by a comic book author and illustrator. He did both the pictures and the text, where he talked about exactly how much money he earned per month, exactly how many hours he worked. And he really was, I'm not joking, suffering for his art. And he was not doing edgy, artistic, far-out subculture stuff. He was making comic books out of mainstream movie properties and trying to cater to a mainstream mass-market audience. Okay? Comic books are beating the crap out of us. And I think the comparison, again, whether you look at comic books or TYT, the Young Turks, or some of the other more successful political platforms, why is that? They get people together on camera, and I'm alone on camera. I managed to interact with people via Skype, but there have been very few videos on this channel where there's another human being in the same room with me. They get people together who know the material, are passionate about the material, have informed opinions about the material, and then they engage in analysis and discussion and exchange of views. And I think they disagree. They manage to avoid doing what we see. They managed to avoid outright violence and defamation most of the time. Probably a lot of you know about exceptions to that, where people who are comic book experts on YouTube beat each other up or something. But I don't know about that. I haven't read comic books for 25 years or something. I'm not part of the comic book culture at all. It's not my thing. But I can recognize the success these people have had in bringing together people who are engaged in actively reading the source material, informed opinion, just a high level of commitment to and engagement with the issues, and bringing fresh, original, quality analysis to it, an exchange of views, right? That reflects their opinions, reflects who they are as people, too, right? Do we have that going on within veganism? I would love to boast to say that my channel is one of the few, but there's not a lot. There's never enough. And that's not an unattainable goal. So my point here is, can we make use of YouTube better as a hub or as a crossroads to bring together people of sincere interest in engagement with concern with these issues? Yes. Can we learn from other political movements? Probably not. We can learn from the success of other communities, other niche markets that are making use of YouTube to the utmost. And guys, if you think this is a joke, please stop and think through how much hard work goes into a comic book convention. How much hard work goes into having a conference about a particular TV show, like Game of Thrones. So Game of Thrones, also known as A Song of Ice and Fire, every year, just in the United States, there are so many conventions that where people there's time and money in organizing the convention, but just the time and money people take to travel the convention. If the convention is in California, then half the people are flying there from New York. If the convention is in Colorado, then everybody's coming long distance except for the 2 people who happen to live in Colorado. Okay, people are investing time and money to get together just to, again, I don't know if you want to use the sense of community or not. They're not trying to save the world, but they're beating the hell out of us as vegans. Right? Look at the vegan conventions that have existed compared to comic book conventions, video game conventions, or something like fans of Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire. They're winning, we're losing. And they're making use of this medium to have a dynamic, galvanizing effect on all the people who share those interests, even though they don't have a strong humanitarian streak. They don't have a strong political agenda, where ultimately what they're doing has much more to do with just entertainment and casual interest. So can we harness this medium to get, even more dynamism out of it? Yes, the potential is there. Let's make it happen.